options for
Options and options.
downsizing our square footage. So we have Ryan here again tonight. We asked him the last meeting to put some costs to some of the options that we reviewed, and he has done that, so.
Okay. Well, thanks again for having me. We've been busy at it since the last time we met. Not only putting some numbers to the options that we talked about, but we actually talked about, looking at a couple of additional options. So I've got some new things that we can talk about as well. So, without any further ado, I want to dive right into things. And the first option that we had talked about last time was what it would entail to look at the district as if you were starting with a clean slate on day one. So a couple of the things that we had talked about with this option in particular, that'll look different from last time. We talked about making sure we had accommodated for the tennis courts, the softball fields, those kind of things on the overall site. We also answered some questions about just how many people you wanted to sit in the auditorium, in the gyms, some of the bigger square footage questions that I wanted to get some direction on. So if we were to take that information and use the state guidelines for the square footage for what they recommend for the size, and then also take a look at the regional publications for what they're seeing the cost per square foot for construction in this area as, and use that as our guide for what the cost can be. You'll see that the total budget is, if we were to start with this here, as it's shown at just over $62 million. And that's, again, looking at a cost of $250 a square foot for a little over 250,000 square feet. What that does for us, I wanted to make sure we talked about the outcomes and some of the things we had discussed earlier regarding our goals. What will result in a reduction in square footage for the district to the tune of 369,712 square feet. And of course, along with that, one of the goals here is to look at the potential of reducing our operation and maintenance costs. With that said, if we were even just to take what you currently pay on average per square foot for operations and maintenance, you are currently spending $1,936,000 in the change on operations and maintenance. And this is right off the state website for what is reported here. And based on the square footage that you currently have, you're paying $3.12 a square foot.
Can I ask
for
a
operation.
question?
Sure.
On that, I mean, obviously you looked at that through the department, is that what we declared to the states, that number,
Yes.
1.9? Can you answer, I know we probably could, I mean, has that number gone up over time? Did you,
I don't
can
have
you
the
recollect,
historical-
or did
I
you?
don't have the historic data off the top of my head.
That's fine, I guess I knew that, might not,
Um,
just wondering if you happened to notice that, if you were looking at the numbers at the time, if that number's gone up or
My
not.
educated guess would say yes, as the cost of
Right.
utilities rise. That would be the case, but I don't know that personally. But like I said, based on those numbers, like I said, it's $3.12 a square foot for operation and maintenance for your district. So, just based on the reduction in square footage alone, you'd be looking at $1,020,000 a year in savings for operation and maintenance costs. And your area per student, which is another state guideline that we had talked about, comes more in line with what they recommend. We're at 252 square feet per student, whereas if you recall some of the previous presentations, some of your grade levels were upwards of 800 some square feet per student. So this is, again, getting at our goal of right-sizing the district. Again, we talked about this and the fact that there are some unknowns here. Of course, we don't have a preconceived site. We don't have what the site acquisition costs or whatever potential infrastructure may be needed. Those are unknowns at this stage. Things that, of course, if we decide to pursue this, we could look into as we move forward. Yes.
I just wanted to verify, so it was a cost savings of over $1 million a year,
Yes, for your operations and
Just an
maintenance.
operation.
just in operations?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, and is transportation part of that, or is that you're saying
No.
grounds, buildings,
No.
operations?
Transportation's gonna be difficult to figure out when you don't know where the site is, I guess.
Exactly.
But I mean, we can
You can
extrapolate
guess.
two different campus, the variables of that stuff when we get to
Yeah.
that point.
And I do mention that as well, that that would have to be determined once you know where that site is. And another thing that, again, unique to this option is that the other unknown is the sale or demolition of your current buildings. Whether, I guess, whatever that starts to look like, that's another unknown with this option at this stage of the game. Any questions? Does it kind of sum up what we had talked about last time? Okay, we can always come back, but if there aren't any questions on this piece of it, I can move on.
One question
Oh,
is,
sure.
I think you talked about 50 acres.
Correct. Again, that's
In
a,
our district, do we have 50 acres anywhere?
I don't know personally, I haven't looked into it, but,
The school or just in general?
I don't believe, we don't own 50.
no. Neither campus is 50 acres, as it stands right now. And I know that the state has backed off on that as a requirement. And the biggest reason they have is that they recognize the importance of neighborhood schools. At least that's the message they're sending. So I'm going to say that we haven't seen a lot, pushback from the state if the site is smaller than 50 acres, provided they can still accommodate what the school district needs.
I mean, that 50 acres ain't necessarily in one space. It could be, I mean, I think Mark suggested last time we met, we had one facility here and a sports facility over there. I mean, it could be spread out over multiple places. I mean, not saying that's feasible, but I'm just saying that's part of that.
You are now?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions?
One assumption that you can make is, obviously we can't put an exact dollar figure on transportation costs, not knowing where it is, but being in one spot regardless of where it is going to be far less than what we're currently doing.
Okay.
But I would say site acquisition and preparation of that site could be extremely costly.
Could be.
But I mean, there's infrastructure. I mean, that's another,
So I'm saying,
right?
not just the acquisition, but the preparation of it, to be able to put a building there and get water lines, for example, or sewer lines or whatever to it, if it isn't currently urban in nature.
Close, right?
You're absolutely right.
And those are all unknowns at this point.
But at least it gets you a starting point. And not that this can't be refined, but at least, again, we talked about having a ballpark to start the conversation and. Okay. Well, unless we can always go back, but I'll move on to option number 2 that we had talked about. We have been asked to look at a single academic campus, and we're looking at both campuses and the feasibility of whether either one would be a viable option. And the first one that I'm showing here, it's option 2, would be to look at the Eveleth campus. Now, with this, it'll include some demolition, some additions, some renovations, of course. Some of the bigger square footage numbers that we had talked about last time were, I'll just start with things closest to me here, the bus garage being able to accommodate 24 stalls. Actually, it works out nicely here to get the 4 tennis courts across the end and have drive-through bus lanes there. It's got the footprint for it at least, so we're showing that accurately. And then we also talked about the number of lanes in the pool, gym, how many seats in the auditorium. So those have all been locked in now, and the square footages that we're looking at here, we'd be looking at 110,491 square feet of new space. We would have 214,211 square feet of existing space for a total of 324,702 square feet. Now, you'll see here, I have a construction budget of just over $55 million for both the new and the renovation included in that number. I also have the demo for what would need to be taken down to make that happen here.
That's included?
It's a separate line item you can see here under that. So the total number I'm showing here for building construction there is $58,259,000 and change. So with that option, we would be looking at a reduction in area of a little over 280,000 square feet, which, using the apples to apples formula here, would result in a change in operation and maintenance costs, a reduction of $873,856. And again, that's just using your average O&M cost per square foot right now.
What was that saving?
It's $873,356. Like I say, just using the same formula for that. The area per student is elevated from the state recommendations at 323, but it's still significantly less than the, like I say, some buildings that were upwards of 800 some square feet per student. And the reason being is we have some existing buildings in this plan still, of course, that we're looking at renovating and continuing to use. So we have slightly less, I'm going to say, efficient area per student than what a brand new building would be, but still very workable. Same caveats about this plan regarding the track. We've had discussions, many discussions about how the track isn't very feasible where the current footprint is, and so we would still be looking at another piece of property for the track and field at least with this option. With this, again, I'll bring up the transportation piece would need to be determined yet, and the decision about a sale or demolition costs for, in this case, the Gilbert campus, just to use a number of, we've had some recent demolition projects come in right in the neighborhood of $13 to $14 a square foot for buildings of 2 to 3 stories high. So I'm using 15, knowing that this may not happen for a year or two. Let's say there's some inflation there. I'm just as a placeholder, using $2,758,000 at $15 per square foot against the square footage in Gilbert. Just to, again, give you the ballpark for what that could potentially be if you were to look at demolition on that side. Not that you are, but give you the information about it. Okay. All right. Any questions about this option in particular?
Could you give me those square footage numbers again?
Sure. The new was 110,491 square feet. The existing is 214,211 square feet.
Okay.
And you're probably going to hear me say this a lot of times tonight. I want to make sure we, it's still a work in progress. If there's things you want to change, do differently, I'm rattling stuff off to the dollar and to the square foot based on what we calculated here, but please don't feel like they're set in stone. It's just lines on paper, and we can still make adjustments, of course.
So bus garage, yeah, how big was that? 8,000 square feet?
18,000,
18,000.
yeah, able to accommodate 24 stalls. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So, like I mentioned earlier, the next option, number 3, looks at the Gilbert campus. And what we might be able to do the same thing on that property. One of the comments last time we talked about how it's a much smaller site, and the change in grade makes it more challenging as well. With that said, trying to accommodate all the program square footage and the spaces that are needed here, we made a couple of revisions from last time in looking at having, adding a second story to part of this piece, and I will still say that when we build out to the boundaries, basically, we are still having to make some tough decisions. There are things that we aren't able to fit, to be honest. We end up eating up a lot of square footage and do not have adequate outdoor space for play areas, for any of the athletics, for adequate parking, things like that, because we're using so much of that footprint for the program space we need in the building. So there are definitely some things that I've had to give. It's a extremely challenging site to try to get everything to fit, and in the end, we can't fit everything on this site. It just isn't enough real estate there. Honestly, if you wanted to look at something like this, we would have to talk about acquiring property, I would think, to realistically look at making this a viable option. With that said, we are currently able to, with what we are showing, we have a significantly higher amount of new building with this piece. Because of the need to go vertical and because of the inefficiency with some of the existing spaces, we have more demolition and new construction with this option. So, right now, what we're showing has 200,036 square feet of new construction.
Give me that number again.
200,036. And we are having 79,881 square feet of existing building remaining. As you can see here, well, if you can read this, that equates to $63,800,000 for the construction piece of it. The buildings that the portions of the building or campus that we would need to demo would cost $1.56 million, and giving us a total $65,416,000. Again, using the same formula, we would be looking at reducing the square footage that the district has by 322,467 square feet with this option, the way it's drawn, resulting in savings for operation and maintenance in a little over $1 million. Our area per student, you can see, is at 296 square feet. What I will say, like I say, we're not able to accommodate the industrial arts addition. The swimming pool was cut back to 4 lanes. I'd say there were things that had to give in this addition. So I just want to make sure you're aware of that those numbers do not include an apples to apples comparison to others when it comes to some of those program
So
spaces.
when you say more manual arts, that's not keeping the current ones, would be nothing.
Correct. This is if we were to look at just having everything on one campus in Gilbert. Unless we were to, something would have to give, because, your shop classes, especially, auto shop, I'll say, it needs to be at grade. And we are just out of square footage space at grade with this particular site. So, okay, so I think that covers my caveats there. The same comment about transportation. If we were to use the same cost per square footage and look at the Eveleth campus, again, if you were to look at either sale or if you were to look at potential demolition, we'd be looking at over 6.3 million to demolish the Eveleth campus as it is right now. Again, as a placeholder, I'm gonna say. Okay.
But just a quick question, Ryan, the total square footage in Eveleth only is 325,000. Gilbert is 280,000.
Yeah.
That's 45,000 square feet. What is missing?
The industrial arts,
Okay,
the bus garage,
no bus.
two lanes on the pool. There, and let's see here. Those are the first things that come to mind. I apologize, I didn't break out those square footage pieces, but
Yeah.
that's the majority of what that square footage difference is.
Some of
Now,
those-
the manual arts is a good chunk of that, and the bus garage.
Yes, yeah.
Would some of that discrepancy be because Eveleth would have 214 existing that might not be 100% efficient? Would that be safe to say or
There
somewhere?
were some problems with the existing building because there's stairwells and things that, I mean, as they add on.
Just
there's a
trying to
stairwell.
compare the discrepancies of
Square
why there's
footage that's
difference
being
in.
used that
Yeah.
we can't get rid of.
You know, if we were able to fit everything on this footprint, the square footages would be very comparable, you know, right in the same ballpark, but we, trying to hold on to some green space, you know, for the elementaries especially, it's a challenging site.
Okay. Ryan, is it because of the location on the hillside with the greenstone behind it?
There's just not the acreage either, right?
Yeah, it's both, I'm gonna say. You can see here that there are portions of the site that we have not shown expansion into because of that.
Yeah.
Of course, there is that property on the other side of Jones Street too, that for the playgrounds and
Summit.
that.
No.
Yep,
Summit.
and I'm showing
This is
that as,
Gilbert.
Yeah, in Gilbert.
Jones, it's not in Gilbert.
You don't have
Some-
Jones.
Oh, I'm
Across
sorry.
Summit, yeah.
Sorry.
I knew you were
Okay.
mixed up on that.
but we're currently showing that as a parking lot.
Which isn't ideal either.
No, I
It's
mean,
down in a hole.
exactly.
Then you put a skywalk. Well, it's not completely out of the question, but it would really raise the price.
Okay.
Parking garage.
And multiple levels. Okay, the option 4 that we have been asked to look at looks at keeping both campuses, but right-sizing both campuses. Still trying to accomplish the goals we set out to accomplish in reducing square footage and operational maintenance costs and modernizing space and improving the space for the offerings and curriculum. So with that said, the first sheet that I have here is for the Eveleth campus. This, I will say, is looking at the grades as they are today. So pre-K in Gilbert, K through 4 here, 5 through 8 in Gilbert, 9 through 12 here. And we were asked to look at another option where the grades are configured differently. That's coming up here, but I'll start with where they are right now. So, with that said, again, we'd be looking at some selective demolition, some additions, and renovating these spaces so that the grades that are here, again, so we can accomplish those goals. What we're looking at here, to get right to the numbers, is 59,725 square feet of new space, where we would have 274,345 square feet of existing space, giving this campus a total of 334,070 square feet, as it's drawn right now. Now, you recall with maintaining 2 campuses, the decision was made last time that we would only add a single station gym over here, knowing that we would have gyms in Gilbert. The decision was made to look at a 6-lane pool. We advantage around 4 or 8, and we split the difference. And again, we decided on a 1,000-seat auditorium and a 24-stall bus garage. So, So, I've got this option, the budget items for it, I'll total on the next sheet. So, one other thing I should mention, you have 95 spaces currently in the parking lot here. We are able to accommodate 150 plus, I'm gonna say, with the additional space here. And in that,
Is that the manual arts building?
yes, and with that bus garage area, we could fit up to 85 spaces right now over there. So it's a significant addition to a number of parking spaces compared to what you currently have. Okay.
That didn't change the busing situation, right?
And-
Just to the current configuration?
I'll admit, I haven't called up, a civil engineer to look at the flow of that. And Jeff and I had a conversation about this too, and I apologize for not having that piece
Oh,
changed
that's
this
fine, I
time.
just think
We're-
that on the very first option, when we looked at just Eveleth, there was the comment that maybe we could, look at different directions but that
Yeah.
really didn't come into play on this one because we were just kind of looking at just the way it is now, right?
Yeah, I think, we will look at that. We definitely will. Okay, so if we were to take a look at the Gilbert campus, continuing to offer the same grades that they do now. Again, what we had talked about here is having a pre-K addition on the opposite side of, that 60s corridor. Looking at having a locker room addition to replace the lockers that would come out with the pool and gym addition. We would look at having those science classrooms brought upstairs in that existing music and shop addition. And then we would look at having another gym added over here so that you would have 2 stations of gym here. That cafeteria would function as, what we call a cafetorium, so you could have seating in that, have it be multi-purpose out here. We would continue to utilize that existing media center and the Nell Sheen as well. So with this addition, we'll be looking at 30,600 square feet of new construction. We would have 93,561 square feet of existing building here, for a grand total of 124,161 square feet on this campus. When you take a look at both campuses in this option, the construction ends up being over 77 million. And again, you're going to start to see here some of the redundancies, the inefficiencies of having the 2 campuses, and the additional square footage required to do that. So the new construction is that number. The demo budget for what needs to come down on both campuses is $3,553,170, making this option, as it's drawn right now, $80,470,045. It only reduces your square footage by 162,153 square feet, and would result in, again, using the same formula, a reduction in operation and maintenance costs of $505,917 a year, and would result in an area per student of 455 square feet.
So it would cost us 80 million to save 500,000 a year.
So you can start to see some of the cost and redundancies here, and having 2 campuses, the duplication also.
Got a question.
Sure.
How come we don't see a drawing here with the K through 6 and Gilbert and 7-12?
That's a great segue.
He said it was coming, Keith. He said it was coming.
It's like I teed it up for you. Thanks, Keith.
Oh, I don't.
All right, so, yes, we were asked to look at reconfiguring the grades so that we would have 2 campuses still, but look at the potential of pre-K through 6 in Gilbert and 7 through 12 in Eveleth. The first drawing you'll see here is for the Eveleth campus. You'll see that the majority of it is, it's in all essence, it's the same square footage for this grade configuration, very similar to what it would have been with the grades as they are now. What really happens is that the Franklin Elementary would need to be renovated to be able to accommodate those upper grades to do that here. We're also looking in this option at holding on to the current auditorium and the classes below there. Again, if we're going to keep 2 campuses, instead of having 4 stations of gym on one campus, we would add a single station, and we would have that 6-lane pool on this side, I'm going to say, in this option as well.
And the Franklin is oversized for what we need.
Yeah. So
Gross.
we would not be adding the 2nd story to the science wing in this option. We wouldn't need to do that, so we aren't showing that here.
So Franklin would house what grades?
7,
Yeah.
7 and 8?
That's it.
Yeah.
What do you do if there's?
Right.
Just a lot of dead space there.
Absolutely.
So, with this particular option, again, we'd be looking at the 59,725 square feet of new and the existing of 274, 345 for the total again of 334 and 070.
That's just on this campus?
Yep.
Which is more than we need for the entire K-12 population.
Yep.
That was the same as the other option.
Yep, it is. The square footage for that, the numbers for those grades is very similar. And like say when you can't hardly omit a classroom or 2, out of the Franklin, so to speak. And we're adding the specialty spaces really, and we're not adding anything for, I'm going to call it standard typical classrooms here. We're reusing everything to the extent we can, and really the new construction covers those specialty areas here that we don't have. So with that said,
What's the cost again?
I've got it on the next page here, the last page. I'll get through the Gilbert side of it here first. In this case, we would still have the Nell Sheen. It would be similar to what you saw before in the pre-K edition, and reusing the media center, the cafetorium piece, the locker room edition, having the 2 stations of gym. We would need more space for those elementary grades, so we show another addition there to be able to accommodate the classrooms in that piece. As you can see, not as congested, of course. You don't have all of the grades you would have had with option 2 or 3 or whatever it was. In this option, we'd be looking at 60,600 square feet of new, and existing being 93,561 for a total of 154,161 square feet here on this campus, the way it's drawn. With the construction here, again, we're with the 2 campuses both being worked on, the number climbs. So we're at 83 million plus. Plus the demo on both sides, being 3.5, giving us a grand total of 87 million, north of 87 million. And there again, the change in area, the reduction in square footage is 132,000 153, resulting in an even smaller savings at $412,317 per year, and that area per student at 485. You know, it's just the more the existing spaces you keep, the less efficient you are. And I want to say that, like I was honest when I said that this is a work in progress. I have no doubt that, you know, when we get deeper into it, we'll find areas to nip and tuck and chip away at that. But I don't want to blow smoke or try to. I want to make sure we have it covered for you.
So the bottom line on this one is over 87 million for a savings of 412,000 a year.
And that's to think that maybe it's more efficient to group grades better, and it's not, right?
No, we just have, it's still way too much square footage.
I
We're not
agree.
saving anything.
Part of that, you know, I'll say, we have some existing square footage that we have, you know, the state calculates that you're not using. You know, the footprint of the Franklin is 23-some thousand square feet, that whole basement. You're not using it for students, but it's there, you're heating it, you've got, you know, and it's on the tally from the state, so I'm counting. Same thing with the Nelshin, same thing with the high school building we're in here, we have one art class. 2 art classes, there's a couple of art classes down there, I know, but it's been a goal, I know, of this board, at least in years past, to get students out of that lower level. And if we can do that, you know, there again, we'll have square footage there that we're not using for students, which is good in one way, but on the other side, it still goes against you in your equation for what you need to maintain.
As far as operating costs, I mean, I was still trying to get with it when you started talking about that.
Sure.
Obviously, there's a difference, say, like the new building. I mean, you were kind of figuring, hey, this is what your cost, this is what your square footage is. We can do some fuzzy math, and this is our ballpark numbers we're playing with.
Yeah.
Would that be the same number for like a brand new efficient building? Did you touch that? I mean, if you did, I'm sorry.
The number I'm using is the average of what you have currently. So we know that if we reduce your current square footage, you're going to save, I'm going to say safely save that average. However, you're right. There are existing buildings that are torn down that are replaced with new, which should be more efficient. I don't have that answer yet until we get further into the systems and things like that.
I'm more concerned, I mean, as Mona pointed out, the difference between square footage and savings, and I mean, if we're using that metrics as an overall ballpark savings, I mean, the biggest savings right now is the new option, but, I mean, outside, that's not the complete cost, we understand that,
Right.
because of the acquisition and infrastructure and utilities.
Someone knows.
But, I mean, as far as operating costs, I mean, is it possible to guess that it could be a bigger savings because it's gonna be more efficient? Or would you not really wanna say that at this stage? And I understand.
I want to say that. I really do. But I'm going to be cautious.
You just want to use the same metrics across the board.
I do. That's part of it too, is I want to keep it apples to apples, and I feel very comfortable talking about what we know, the average of what you have. As we get further along, we of course will look at having more refined information and be able to tell you more about what you can save based on some decisions. But in the meantime, I was asking myself the same question. Those of us in our office that were working on this were asking the same question too. We're going, I'll take my hand, we're going to do a little research into some of the recent buildings we've had constructed and start to look into schools and start to look into what they're seeing for utility costs right now from the most recent projects that we've had, and see if I can get some real information about something recent for you.
This is what they were paying in an older building at this square footage. Yeah. Now they're in a newer building. They got a couple years of history, and there's some savings that are different.
Yep. So I'm going to do some research and see if I can come back with some thoughts on that.
That's right.
Okay. I know that's a lot to take in, and I threw a lot of numbers out there. I appreciate your patience, and what I would like, I guess, just to continue the conversation and to keep moving forward. I guess, is there anything that jumped out at you, anything that I didn't answer that you'd like me to find out, like what Mike mentioned? I would love to be able to, let's say, you know, get to an option or two here, or we can, you know, get to that next level of detail and start refining things further, if that's your preference.
Well, I think if right sizing is what this board chooses to do, I think the general assumptions that have been made at this point are gonna be, the sticker shock, I'm guessing, is pretty high right now, so I think it would need to be further refined. We need to look at actual space and what needs to stay and what needs to go, and get that cost out, because I mean, like Mom said, I mean, if we're gonna spend $80 million to get $200,000 of savings, it's not a real big point to it, but doing that. But if we can spend a bunch of money to save $1 million a year, well, then they might be more interested. But still. So I don't know.
But we also know there's a maximum amount of money we're ever gonna be able to get from any resource.
Is that quantifiable?
72
Yeah.
million. And what that's based on is our net tax capacity for our entire district. There's an equation that,
And is that from just the straight up public, or that's just all that?
that's all of our
The
property.
function of that we can build?
That is the maximum amount we can build.
Which puts some of these options in jeopardy.
I think most of them.
I'm trying to be nice.
Well, it's just, it is what it is.
I mean,
right?
let's be fair here. I mean, if we know that 72 million is,
That's what
I mean, that's maxing it out. Option one is
That's the right
pretty
number,
as
isn't
it would be.
Wasn't it 72 million? That's what he told us. No,
So option one, building new, you know, you give us a number of 62 million-ish to build, but again, that doesn't include infrastructure and property acquisition and all the pieces that go with that. I seriously doubt that we would find a piece of property large enough and with the amenities that we need for that little bit between there. Some of these other options are, of course, aren't anywhere near as expensive, but we're gonna have to be real careful that we don't top out on that and put ourselves too deep in the hole to make a change. And if we're going to go out and borrow money, that we're getting the biggest bang for our buck, and a couple of these don't look anywhere. I mean, if it's gonna take us that long to even come close to recouping some of that, it isn't worth going that direction.
These are still ballpark numbers, I mean,
I know,
everything's over budget, right? Which is good.
I'll add that to my comments, and I understand these are only ballpark right now.
But that's all I'm thinking.
But if you
by the time
use
get
them
there.
just as sort of a starting position, none of them look enticing. And if we're gonna go to the public or to any venue and ask for that much money, I wanna make sure that we're gonna see something back for it.
And I completely agree, and we talked a little bit about this last time too, about how, you know, when some of these conversations happened, we said, well, let's decide on this, and we can always reel it back in. So we know there are areas in these options where we can start to look at refining it to get the budget down, at least to the number that Jeff mentioned. I mean, it's obviously not feasible to do anything that's beyond that. And at the same time, I'm hoping that, as I mentioned earlier, we can also see some more significant savings the more, as we get more into the details here too. That'll help offset that. So, thanks for not killing the messenger. I think we're excited to, let's say, kind of dive into it and get further into the details and start answering some more questions for you. And and keep making good progress forward here.
What's next?
So, my question earlier, I asked about, do you want to focus in on one or two options at this time? Or do you still want to leave everything on the table? I'll just ask.
Is everything based on that like 1,000 student threshold kind of that we've been
I've
talking
been,
about?
I've been continuing to use that 1,006 number. And yeah, we've had that conversation, and that's been my baseline. As you know, that's been in flux.
Well, it seems to move option one. We are really limited on space, finding space to do option one, correct?
I
We haven't
don't,
looked at it.
I don't know, I haven't looked for a site.
How can we say we're limited if we haven't even looked?
Yeah.
I mean, there's state land all the way around us. I mean, can't you petition the state to give us land? I mean, I don't know. I'm just asking,
And I will say that if that's an
You have to
option you
buy
want to
it or
pursue,
Yeah, you have to buy them.
that's usually an exercise in itself,
We're not getting
doing
it.
a search for a site.
for a school?
Yes, no.
Well, how do I know?
No, Mike, I mean, the state give anybody anything for nothing?
All right, thanks.
No, I don't mean to be derogatory, I mean, it's just, that I don't think, I've never seen it happen. We've always, any school's had to buy it.
I say we just don't do nothing.
But it doesn't hurt to ask.
Yep.
Well, or if they're, I don't know if you want to go so far as to even rank or kind of prioritize, or there are just outright options that you just don't want to look at anymore. Or if you want to leave them all on the table, I guess we can do that too.
I think it would be a hard sell. First of all, if you look at these that, I mean, one that just happened to jump in front of me here is 83 million. First of all, we can't come up with 83 million. Let's start there. But even if we could, you're not saving enough to make that a sensible financial choice. Here's another one, 77 million, you're only getting a savings of 500,000 a year. Granted, 500,000 a year is a lot. But now when you've got that much debt attached to it, you've got to have some balance with your debt and what you're recouping on it. And, it's just,
The other thing that I had in the back of my mind as we were working through the numbers is that earlier on we presented how if some of the current sources of funding that you have were not there, you would be deficit spending to the tune of, I don't have the exact number. One of the goals was to find enough savings to be able to not have to deficit spend. And I know that there's debt that comes on this, and we'll have to work hand in hand with the folks who run the numbers to hopefully get to a project that makes sense.
Well, if we start from that 72 million, it's the first three options that are under that, right?
well, not the first one, when you figure land acquisition.
Well, but what do we know? The 62 million is under that, and it leaves 10 million. That what's before us, those three options have a chance of staying under the 72 million. And maybe those are the three that we get more information, more detail. Just a place to start from. I don't know what you're asking, but just looking at that 72 million threshold.
I think 5G are off the charts.
Yes.
Yeah, narrow it down a little bit.
We gotta narrow down somewhere.
Well, they
Yeah,
also
numbers, right.
start at
Right
over our threshold, yeah, they start higher than
Yeah,
that,
that's,
so.
yeah, that's not impossible.
To get under the threshold, we'd have to do less,
Yeah.
try to get by with less on those options.
And even
Yeah.
number 4 is even, yeah, what we can afford. So I hate to say it.
Well, I'll admit, I didn't know that 72 million number when we were putting this together. I just found it out today. So I'll say now we have something to shoot for, at least a ceiling.
Well, given that 72 million is good, it seems to me it's those first three options we need to look at further in.
I would eliminate 4, 5, and 5E, 5G.
Okay?
And narrows it down a little bit.
Even if we say, we'll kind of put them on the back burner as we look at the first three for now. Not that we can't resurrect.
Yeah, let's not forget.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, that's helpful. Okay. The next step is getting into, getting into the weeds and the more detail of it. So we'll look at doing that with these next three options and starting to actually look at, the classrooms, the actual, the spaces that will be here. Not that we're gonna have a detailed floor plan, but we'll be able to at least start taking the program of spaces and plugging it into not only new additions, but into the existing spaces to see how we can best utilize them and really focus in on what that efficiency factor is in those existing spaces. Fair enough? And I'll work on the site piece of it and the circulation there, and then also try to find some more current information on utility savings from recent projects that we've done. Anything else that you guys can think of?
I just thought of something that's maybe way out of whack here, but an option 3 for the Gilbert site, since we don't have adequate outdoor space, what's the option as far as this campus, not to sell all of it, but to sell half of it and leave the other half for outdoor football, baseball, track?
I think, we did talk
Problem
about.
is, it's still an inadequate space for that, I mean, you can't put a track. The track won't fit in between the two city streets, I guess is the best way to put it.
But for whatever outdoor activities we could have, you still use part of this campus, of this property.
And then
Well,
you,
we're back to transportation costs that we didn't move on.
You know,
That is something, as you can tell, that's an unknown right now. So that'll come into play as well.
Until we can narrow down if there's even property available, transportation costs are gonna be a big, big question. Maybe we should reach out to our legislators and see what the options are, if there's any land around that the state would like to donate, or if the college system is gonna exit out of the existing the old tech school over here.
I was told that, that's not
That's
true.
not happening.
It's not, okay.
They would
That was the
close,
rumor that
I was told that they would close Virginia before they would close Eveleth.
Good.
That's an interesting comment I got.
Well, I'm glad to hear that comment. That was an option, but I think we have to look and see what's out there.
As far as that 72 million, not to be a dead horse on money, but that's everything we can go to the public for? I mean, this Bach fund, I don't know what the real fund of it is. I mean, if there was some kind of cooperation, collaboration, consolidate, I mean, is that,
That's different.
that's extra money?
72 million is what we can bond from our boards.
That's just public money, and then there's other, we can get money from above and beyond that in different directions, is what you're saying.
paying it back could be interesting, but,
What's that?
paying it back could be interesting, but.
Well, I just threw that bond fund out there because that's
Yeah.
the carrot that everybody keeps talking about, right? Of free money, right?
Yeah, that's right, free money.
That isn't gonna exist when that taconite tax goes away, because there's nothing gonna be.
There's a fail safe in it, so, well,
Is it? Oh, that's right, there was, well, it's not gonna grow as much, but there's, I mean,
I have been meeting with folks about that fund, because as you can imagine, lots of schools are in the area that are interested in how that's going to be dispersed. My impression, and that IIRB hasn't really said a word about it, they're moving forward cautiously. But my impression is that they're going to hold steadfastly into the cooperation/consolidation aspect of releasing any of that, because they are very interested in, and they're aware that most of the area, not all, but most of the area schools have facility issues, and a lot of money is going to have to be dumped in it, but they are not interested in financing a new building for a very little town on the range anymore. They're very interested in seeing consolidations.
I still think you're gonna see a consolidation probe someplace. I think we as a range we almost have to.
it's really gonna come down to
It's
what
gonna be a
happens.
matter of survival, is what it's gonna be.
Yeah, it is, and that's, I don't know, I just casually talking to the Virginia superintendent a week ago, and having kind of known some of these numbers and how you feel about them, I just asked him, I said, well, what do you guys think about that? Because we were talking about capping that fund. And he says, as long as, he said, my board would not be supportive of the building unless they could walk to it from Chestnut Street. I said, well, that kind of kills that conversation.
Nothing new there.
Yeah.
What's Mountain Iron gonna do if theirs fails? If theirs fail? Do we know it? Have we had any casual conversations with them?
Yeah, I don't know that they are currently planning for failure.
Well, obviously, but what are they gonna, I mean, outside looking in, what are they gonna do? I mean, that's a big deal.
Well, talking to one of the board members, I think they're on the wait and see bandwagon right now.
They might have ideas, but they're not sharing.
They're not sharing.
Because technically,
They're looking at possible consolidation of St. Louis County Schools.
not a cooperation, a consolidation.
Well, cooperation is the first word they use, but if that fails, they could see the possible consolidation. That's not on the conversation right now.
Because they actually, district to district, we have borders with them, don't we?
With which one?
Mountain Iron.
Yes.
Yeah. So we do cooperate, some of our classes with them.
I mean, just to put this
They
in,
too are not interested in anything that isn't on Highway 169.
they might not have a choice, I mean, they're so small. Just to put in perspective, when that cooperation, was that what it was called? Co-op? Oh, co-location.
Collaborative.
Co-location. How far, did that get as far to put numbers in? Was that for that facility with 3 different districts, and that was only 7 through 12?
They never gonna build it.
And what was, just put in perspective, was it over 100 million or something?
Was it 120? I thought it was 120.
It started at like 80, but then by the time
Yeah, it
the
was-
talks fell apart, it was well over
I
that
said
number.
100.
But that was only 7 through 12, wasn't
Right.
it? Yeah,
Yeah.
so it just costs money to build schools, right?
And that was actually interesting. I think the actual building cost was somewhere in the 80 to 85 million there.
You're just trying to put it all in perspective.
Well, and they added on the field house and everything else on
Jane build, shoot for the moon, and, right?
there. And they did. But anyhow, we better narrow down, we eliminate some of them.
I appreciate that.
What's the time frame for the next step here?
I was just grabbing my calendar.
I think we should also consider, entertain the idea of hiring a transportation consultant to go through scenarios of what it would cost if transportation's a huge cost to us, too.
Well, we already know our back and forth, don't we?
I can tell you what the back and forth is, maybe it wouldn't be that valuable.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying, I mean, the bus is still gotta run to Vale and Auburn Township, I mean, would that really make too big a difference? That
The routes are gonna change if you're, so the unknowns that we would have our figuring was when you're, it's gonna be different. Because right now, we pick up K through 12 students on a bus, but then they're dropped off here, shuttled here and there. That would be a little bit tricky rather than just going to one location. Excuse me, going to one location.
So you're saying that there could be a substantial
I
reduction?
don't know. I'd like to believe there would be, but I don't know.
Would be, first step be, we need at least solicit proposals from transportation
Well, I don't
consultants.
know if that's something that we're, I don't know. I don't know what you guys want to know to make a decision.
We gotta know the back and forth for one. I think that demographic study will be a piece of the pie. I don't know how it'll fit, but it'll be interesting.
I mean, this is a pretty monumental decision, regardless of what way we go.
Right.
And it's not something that you're gonna want to go in
I
blind.
think maybe we should think about these three for a while, like a few days anyway.
I mean, how much further in refining these do we need to get before we decide if it's worth going further or not? I mean, I
I
guess
think
that's
some
the
of the things,
question.
yeah. What are we left with, 1, 2, and 3 now?
That's what I heard.
And what's your calendar look like?
Unfortunately, I'm out of town 2 weeks from now on the 9th. Would it be possible to meet on the 16th
16?
instead?
That's 3 weeks from now?
Yeah.
Do we have school on that President's Day?
Is that a board meeting?
If you want to stick to Tuesdays, I guess.
Yeah, well, the 15th is a holiday, so we don't have a board meeting that day.
No, our
Well,
meetings are the
no,
8th and the 22nd.
8th and the 22nd?
So it'd be like the 9th
It'd
or...
be the week between, so. I have a meeting midday, but 16th is here, that's a holiday. Our school board meetings are here.
Oh, okay, so we might have
16th is
Either
a
side.
Tuesday?
Yeah.
Tuesday.
What are we gonna, what are we shooting for?
Are you open on 17th? I mean, I could do the 16th if need be, but 17th would be better.
Yeah. I could do the 17th as well.
What do we need to have in place for that? What do we,
What's
Are
the
we
goal?
into Lent at that point? If we are, aren't we?
Oh, it's 9th.
I think so.
What
Yeah.
I would like to do is take our program of spaces, like I said, actually start plugging them into not only the additions, but more importantly, the existing buildings. So I can know what that efficiency factor is, or inefficiency factor, call it what you want, and be able to have more accurate square footage numbers based on what spaces are going into your existing buildings. The new construction is much easier, you know, it's a clean slate. The other two options are where, you know, it can take a little bit of work to get that to fit right in there, and that's what I really want to answer for you, is have a better idea of those square footages, and in the meantime, like I say, talk about, work on that site circulation piece and the operation and maintenance costs, have that information for you as well. And if, I'll let you guys explore the land acquisition or piece of what's out there. Is there anything else that you can think of you want me to look into in the meantime?
well, I guess initially when the stuff that you have on paper, I mean, I use Mike's phrase, dream building. We went dream building and I think dream building might be a little out of our range. So I mean, how do we decide how to pare that back? So we can get a little more range.
Things have to get smaller.
But I mean, how do we get there, and how do we get there by the time we meet again on the 17th, so that we can, I mean, you can keep this, that's fine, but I think we need to start looking at some pared down versions
Yep.
of reality.
Like give up some things, is that what you're
I don't know.
suggesting, or is that what you're throwing out there?
Yeah, I mean, do we, I mean,
how do we get the square footage down?
If you want me to start, I mean, as I'm working through it, there very well, I know how this works, there will be things that will come to the top that, you know what, it would be easy or make sense to reduce here or there. Why don't I come up with a laundry list, shopping list of areas where I think we could save as I'm working through it, as our team is. Like say whether it's reducing lanes in the pool or talking about, you know, the number of seats in the auditorium, like, you know, there are a number of
See,
areas.
I
we
guess
could
I'm
look
not even worried about seats and lanes right now. I'm concerned about, I mean, if we're remodeling, I'll just use the Franklin as an example. There's rooms there that are 1,200 square feet, and there's others that are 800 square feet. I mean, there's no equity in there. But yet, if we're going to cram a bunch of kids in the least amount of space possible, how can we utilize that space best? And I'm even talking, what if we move walls? I mean,
Well,
That's a big deal.
it is a big deal, but
our,
there's, the problem with using an existing space is there's still a ton of wasted space.
I guess I'll ask the question, do you want me to engage a consultant for an estimate, a contractor, construction manager, estimator of some kind, to get you more accurate cost information?
Well, we're eventually gonna have to talk to someone, because if we reduce the space that's not being used right now, that would be a place to start.
We can show it on plan, but the actual cost, we're using cost per square foot numbers right now, which at this stage of the game is fine, but it sounds like if we're gonna get to that next level, we may want the next level of detail.
The problem with that is, I mean, if you look at, I'll use the Franklin as an example again, there's at least 6, probably 7 empty classrooms in that building. If we keep the configuration as it is, how do you get those 6 classrooms out of that building?
No, when I'm thinking about, even over in Gilbert, they got a whole wing that's not being used.
All wings are easy, but
Yeah.
classroom here,
Classroom's
classroom there, I
different.
mean, what do you do?
Yeah, I don't have the answer for that, I couldn't tell you. But we gotta start someplace. At least get
So, I mean,
some.
that's, if that's, I mean, or, I don't know.
And how much do we spend on consultants before we finally make up our mind what we're gonna do?
Yeah, and I'm not really game for a consultant on that at this point. I mean, I really think,
I'd wanna wait maybe one more step before we start talking about it.
We've gone to the 2 or 1 option.
Yeah.
In the meantime,
I mean, one of the things that was in your proposal is that we were gonna do a space use program.
Yep.
And talking with teachers and staff and all that, and I know we talked to teachers and staff, but I mean, what did we get out of that? And do we know what absolutely has to still be there and what we can live without? 'Cause
that's,
I mean, we're at that point right now, we're gonna decide what can we just not live without and what can go.
I mean, is that a function to where we just have to, maybe the administration sits down and said, this is our core? I mean, English, math, science, and this is, and extracurricular stuff might be, cost us this much more. I mean, could it be that simple that we just, I mean, is it our offerings that we could reduce square footage by? I mean, we don't need this room because
I'm asking you guys right now, I mean, we're looking at spending $65 million on renovation, are you okay with that?
No,
I'm not.
I'm not.
I don't think anyone in this room is, so I mean, what are we gonna do about that? But yet we have this monster white elephant in the room with too much space in this district. Something has to be done about that. You're gonna find out, and if we ever get to the finance and budget meeting, that something has to be done about that.
Yeah.
this has been for years in the making,
Yeah,
yeah.
we have to.
But nobody, I mean,
But on
for
the other
this,
side, we're looking at $65 million to do something. Is there other options that we can look at that don't cost $65 million? I don't know, and I don't know the answer to that.
our enrollment numbers are going down. I mean, nobody,
I think it's pretty hard to go to the public where a large majority of them have lost their income and are struggling and don't know
You were asking.
when their
65
next
million.
paycheck is gonna come
Yeah.
for 72 million or 65 million, or pick a number, because I don't care what it is, it will have an impact on taxes. I mean, there's just no getting around that. We're not talking a small enough number that it gets absorbed and isn't noticed. We're talking huge money. Nobody wants to go backwards. We're an aging population in this community also, between Eveleth and Fayal and Gilbert.
Yeah.
There are more people over 50 than there are under. Many of them on fixed incomes. Who wants their
Yeah.
property taxes to go up? I'm not against doing something. I think we have, whatever we do, we have to be very aware of the fact that this money isn't coming out of thin air, it's coming out of somebody's pocket.
Well, yeah, all the taxpayers.
Mine too.
Well, yeah, with all taxpayers.
I don't think that we can do nothing. We
No,
have
we
to
have
make
to do
some tough
something.
decisions. But I just wanna make real sure that whatever that decision is, that we put every possible option first.
The
So
impression that I wanna leave everyone with is cutting the English class here and reducing first grade and stuff, and we're way beyond it.
I know, but
Do we go start talking to our neighbors? I mean, that's where this Quad Cities is going, and whether it's 10 years or 50 years, I mean, are we there?
We might be, but others are not.
Well, but, I mean,
so be brave and be the first one out there to admit
I mean,
that there's a better way to do business, and
it's reality. I mean, it's we swallow our prides and say, you know what? I mean, obviously the IRRB knows it. I mean, there's legislatures that will tell you behind the scenes all day long that that's what needs to happen, but it's political suicide to talk about that publicly.
That fund was put in place to facilitate this.
And why don't they want to put rules behind that? Because they want us to figure it out as.
Because they want to get reelected now.
Well, right, I mean, they don't want to put the rules in place, they want us as adults to figure it out, and then they'll, I don't know, I mean, what does that look like? I don't even know, I'm just saying, I mean, are we there? I mean, is it co-location, is it cooperation, is it consolidation? I don't know what the answer, is it, let's go over to the college, can we get the Bach fund from collaborating next to the college, go build a add-on to them, and we'll K through plus 2, you know, I mean, whatever you want to call it, you know, 2-year tech degree. Well, can we access that money that way? I mean, who knows?
Do we have to move on it this fast in 2016? Can we look at it a little bit longer and come up with
I'm
a
gonna tell you right now that
better
this path,
plan, or?
We've been
We've
doing that
been
for 20
rolling
years.
down the road
this
for
can
years.
is at the end of the road right now. We are blessed with some taconite money right now that has given us the gift of time.
And
So when that runs out,
we're done.
it's D-Day then.
Didn't you share that when you got the superintendent job, there was a facility study from the 70s, and the Eveleth drawer and the Gilbert drawer say that, you know, Something's gotta happen, and we've been not doing happening
The
for-
can is at the end of the road right now. And in the next 2 to 3 years, and we can't just snap our fingers and make it happen, so the planning needs to happen now.
and that's,
We have to see
I mean,
about
it's a gut wrenching decision.
downsizing our square footage somehow.
but to what ends? I mean, that's what I said.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking right now, Keith, I mean, not to keep beating the dead horse, is we're at 1,000 kids. Well, we're probably not. Are we at 1,000 kids right now? I mean, by the end of this year, we're gonna be probably 950. Next year, we might be 900. I mean, by the time we actually put a shovel in the ground, we might be at 800. We don't know.
Yeah, well, we don't know that.
Wait till the mines don't fire back up. I mean,
Yeah.
this could be a mass exodus from here.
Yeah,
I
the
mean,
demographic study should give us some.
that's the other side. I mean, if these, I mean, SR Steel's fighting bankruptcy right now. I mean.
But we also
Canada.
know that there are portions of buildings, or in this case, individual buildings that can come down, which would at least put us on the right path. It would get us started.
Get us started.
Gilbert, there's some dead areas that can be taken down to help alleviate some of those
Mhm.
square footage concerns. The Eveleth campus, I'm sure, has, aside from those buildings, has some areas that we can revamp at the very least, where we're not talking quite that extent of money. Now, the savings may not bring us out of the hole, and I'm not suggesting that. But I think we need to be looking at everything we can do, even if some of it is in the short term. If it's an area, I mean, I'll use Gilbert simply because we've talked about it in the past, the swimming pool area and some of those
Swimming
things
pool,
that need,
The old rubber gym,
that could be removed.
the old band hall upstairs.
You know, it
All that.
may be advantageous, we would take that down no matter what, to start looking at doing some of those projects to start alleviating some of that. And again, I'm not suggesting that's the end of the road or that solves things, but I think we can't look the public in the eye and say, we need this much money, but we haven't done anything in the meantime to alleviate it.
We have to try. We have to start somewhere.
I mean, the problem with that too is, I mean, the function of tearing wings down costs a big bunch of money.
I know that.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's the hard conversation we're having, right? I mean,
I'm just saying maybe we need to look at, I mean, some of these projects, we're talking tens of millions of dollars for a $400,000 a year savings.
Right.
Maybe we'd come close to,
Recouping some.
you know, maybe half that savings with a fraction of the cost outlay. Just wondering if there's some option between building new and some of what we've looked at that would,
Yeah, I know what you're getting at,
you
yeah.
know,
Phase things in a way.
well, it just,
Yeah.
I think part of the shock here is, money doesn't, we all knew what kind of numbers we were gonna see, but when you're talking about demolition of an entire district to go new, or to take down one entire community's identity and bringing everyone to the other one, I realize that financially that makes good sense, and that's our job, I get that. But my goodness, something as simple as pairing and sharing, before we even consolidated, gave people heartburn. We still hear about it.
Heartburn, it's more.
I'm trying to be nice.
I know.
And the thought that, I mean, we need to be looking at every avenue, and I don't care if we have to meet once a week until we get this resolved.
We have
We're
to.
also running out of time, because if we're going to do something, we need to have it on the ballot. That decision has to be made, and it has to be presented to them early enough that it can be on the ballot. And we're talking August, give or take. It's February next week.
Yeah.
You know, if we don't get our butts in gear here, we're not going to be making any decisions. Because we can't go to the public if we don't have a plan in place.
No.
And they're gonna ask the questions that we're asking right now, whether they're popular or not. Have you looked at this option? Have you looked at that option? Have you thought about doing this? And if we have to say, no, we didn't, we just sort of, you know, we had 5 options, we just sort of went, yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah,
That's-
you can't do that.
It's not okay for me, so it sure shouldn't be okay to them.
I'm not willing to spend that kind of money.
Why don't, well, you should rule that out entirely.
Well, I'm just not, I'm just uncomfortable spending that kind of
But
money.
I don't know
because-
that, given what we know right at this moment in time, that you don't wanna jump in both feet.
No. Well, you gotta sit back and look at all the options and try to decide it in a 1-hour meeting. It's not gonna happen. I would still like to look at this a little more. At least we reduced from 7 options down to 3.
So what's our next step?
I mean, can we give it, can we refine the cost any more to make the decision any different?
Well,
I mean, that's my point.
question for Ryan.
Well, you have to understand,
He's guided by us, not really.
right, but if you look at I'll just use the remodeling of the Eveleth campus, I mean, he's accounting for every square foot of this thing getting a refresh,
With the exception of those basement spaces I
with
mentioned.
the exception of the basement. You know,
And,
maybe we go for a bare bones one, and we take out the areas that we aren't using, we.
yeah. And I
do it
think,
I mean, I don't know,
and I've done,
yeah, I mean, these buildings are, there's the other thing, I mean,
They're
nobody
inefficient.
wants, what's that?
They're inefficient.
They're extremely inefficient, I mean, it is
I think
40 degrees in one room and 120
I
in the
think at the
next.
very
I mean,
minimum we
it's-
should do is we should replace our heating and HVAC system in the school. Old campuses, whatever.
They're awful.
They're terrible. I don't care what anybody says about how good those boilers are. They're almost 50, 60 years old. They were state of the art when they put them in. State of the art has changed big time.
yeah, absolutely.
And you don't have to have anybody with a special license to run the low-pressure boilers. They're a lot more efficient.
I completely agree.
You know, and that's part of that 60 million, and I'm guessing that's probably gonna be 10 to 12 million of that 60 million, just replacing the heating system. I mean, it's expensive.
I mean, UNESCO, oh, I just swore. But anyway, everybody seems like, when you cringe when you say new UNESCO, but at the end of the day, I mean, I realize they're in the business to
And they had
pretty up,
options.
I mean, but there was options. I mean, I think even the biggest option was, one of the bigger ones was $16 million to just kind of use what we had and update the heating systems and make things more efficient. I mean,
Well, they had to.
I don't remember what the thing was, but I mean, it could be as simple as something like that, like he says, you know, updating some of our infrastructure, maybe there's some savings involved, but is it enough? I mean, that's that's what we gotta find
Well,
out.
we know we have 2 buildings that we have to tear down.
Well, that's already in the works, we
That's
all
already
agreed on
in the
that.
works.
Yeah, I mean,
But we have to do something. And maybe the budget and finance meeting will bring something to light that.
and I'm not
Well, it'll be more than a
poo-pooing any
light,
of
it's
those
gonna be a
plans.
light, a bolt of lightning is what it's gonna be.
Start buying lottery tickets.
I give up.
Next time it
I don't even
hits
buy
a-
them for myself.
Next time it hits $1 billion, maybe we'll win. But I think,
See ya, I'm out of here.
I think in the meantime, we really need to be,
We need to look at this.
we need to be looking at options short of
these
60
options.
million.
We're moving.
Well,
And you're right,
Well,
you're right, there
I
may
mean,
be
it was-
something,
It was dream building.
Well, I mean,
You know, and realistically, I mean, just putting in a new heating system, I mean, it's not gonna be a major savings, it isn't.
and
It's reality, but
No.
it is a comfort system. I mean, our comfort level in this, and I'm talking for our students, I don't care that Andrea has no heater underneath your desk to stay warm.
that's why we're broke, because of the power bill to pay for your heater.
No, I mean, it's the students, I mean, it's a constant complaint, all winter long, on both campuses. I mean, they go to one room and they're all huddled up like this, and then they're stripping everything off in the next, I mean, it's just awful.
That can cost
I
us money.
could not even hold on to the thing, I'm telling you, if she was.
It's bad.
And when you renovate, you still
Yeah.
have the old buildings that are so bad that we can't do with our infrastructure for everything.
Oh, I forgot about that.
What was the junior high actually condemned for demolition? The junior high,
Yeah,
what was that building put on, that it's no longer usable, it could be
well,
renovated?
we have to have the hearings on,
Well, it was declared once, wasn't it?
yeah, it was the-
Well, it's because of accessibility, that's why it's,
and the asbestos in there.
it's the same thing as the.
Well, I'm just using that example, just using the Magna Arts building, it's structurally its own building, you know. That
I don't even
You're
know.
looking at demoing.
It is structurally sound, but we don't have use for
We don't mind the water running through the basement.
it. There's that.
You got, there's our pool problem right there.
Yeah.
And you could pick and you could share it.
and that's kind of what I was saying, but we don't know what the savings,
We don't want to.
No, no,
we would have to-
that kind of information would be helpful.
That's not helping
sharing
anything.
it.
Right.
Somewhere.
All right, but what are we going to do next year?
Well, if
I guess
you want.
that's what he's asking, right?
You want us to-
So,
Well,
but we've got to keep the ball rolling, because I mean, this is not a problem that's going to go away.
No, it's not gonna go away. See if there's,
Well, maybe we should have our finance meeting and then see how bad it is and then come
Those of
back
us
to
who
this.
survive can come back to the
Right.
table and make a decision.
Because, I mean, honestly, I mean, it's all one and the same conversation. I mean, this demographic study, our enrollment, this conversation, where the money is, it's all dollars and cents. I mean, it's hard to give,
we have to, like, I agree, the words that you have about right-sizing the campuses, we have to. Because we're not, basically, we're not a six section school anymore. Or what, 3, 4?
3 is pretty safe.
3 is safe.
Most of our classes are 3.
Yeah.
There are a
It's
few,
not like the old
there are a
days.
few hangover 4s in there, and there's actually a 2, so.
It's not like the old days when we used to have 600, 500 kids in a class. Those days are gone in a range. Unless you
We will,
consolidate 4 schools.
We're hovering right around that 1,000 mark. Well, how about if we have him, well, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
While we're waiting for this demographic study to be done, why don't we have Ryan do, look at a more bare bones red size.
See if there's something you can come up
Something
with.
we can do
Maybe might pop up now. And there's, the options are reduced from 7 to 3. And meanwhile, we'll have a meeting and see if we're gonna reduce those options even more.
Well,
And I think it would be helpful if we actually had a list of items with the associated cost so that we could make some of those tough decisions. And I'll use an example of, the swimming pools on both campuses are in rough shape.
Oh.
Obviously Gilbert right now is not usable. Eveleth is approaching that, as I understand it. It's
Getting there.
not much better. I'm not suggesting anything, I'm just saying that may be one of those options. If we can't afford to go forward with a swimming pool, we may have to have a district without swimming. I'm not advocating it,
No, but
I'm just
it's
saying,
something that people have
it's
to be
one of
aware
those, it's one of those items, if we could save
I'm coming at her with a
sufficient.
pitchfork there.
That,
I agree, I mean, that's a luxury item, that should be itemized.
well, and again, don't beat me up for it, I'm just using it as an example, but it's one of those things that it isn't necessary for the academic structure of a school. It's wonderful to have, and I'm glad my kids have swimming, my grandkids, but, if you've got to save money, that may be someplace we'll have to save.
And I think that is one of the items that'll be on that list we'll come back with. And whether you want to make a decision to completely take it off the table or hold it as an alternate price or something like that, we'll come up with as many of those types of ideas as we can.
All right, what date?
So I had the 17th last I heard thrown out there.
That's that Wednesday.
Wednesday's fine.
That doesn't work well for me, but it doesn't matter.
16th or 17th.
Or that-
16th is better for me, but
Otherwise, the
I'm
8th.
fine.
Well, that's okay, if you want to do it the 16th.
16?
16th?
Yeah.
February? What?
16th of February?
Yeah, that works too. 16, 17, I don't care.
5 o'clock?
At 5.
All right.
16th.
I don't know,
We have it at 4:30 if you want.
Yes, Tuesday the 16th we're talking.
4:30 is better. 4:30 or
4:30 works?
Okay.
Okay.
4:30.
I can get everybody in.
All right, let's, break for 5 minutes. Good.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you,
Ryan.
Ryan.
Ryan, can we put these on, whatever that is called?
Absolutely.
We need to discuss that,
Okay.
possibly not having this, it's become an issue.
Already? Really?
Okay.
So we need to come up with a different way to
Disseminate.
disseminate information.
Okay. Then, I'll hold off for now. Okay. I'll talk to
But could the board members get a copy of these last 3?
Oh, yeah.
With all the additions and whatever on? Oh, yeah, it'll be like this size.
Well, some of you might still need to take.
We can just make, well, he can make a PDF.
Yeah.
He'll just probably.
I have one of those magnifiers in my room next to the basement, I can pull it over and look at it.
Yeah, I do too.